Welcome back, everybody. This is the Real Psych Media. I am back. This is going to be part 2 of course 2 methods. So in this chapter, in the previous video, we spoke about science as a way of knowing, and then also the scientific approach, and then also early approaches as well. In this chapter, in this specific video, in this part, we're going to be looking at studying behavior and experience, along with behavior, the subjective experience of research participants, as well as the people who perform science. So in this first section, studying behavior and experience, we see that scientists view themselves as using sensory experiences to evaluate their ideas concerning the world. All right, so this is where we see this idea of empiricism take place, which is the process of relying on sensory experiences to verify our ideas about reality. Okay, so using our senses to verify the ideas that we have or assumptions we have within reality. So we see that pure empiricism can actually lead us to erroneous conclusions, but we have to combine it with a scientific method, and it has been productive in psychology and a productive approach in psychology. So our study of behavior and experience, we study our various topics and through a variety of levels, such as cognitive levels, physiological levels, and sociological levels, etc. So it is vitally important to actually understand that the answers that we receive from science depend on the perspective from which they are asked. So everything, you always hear this, it's about perspective. Perspective is very, very important and vital. So we are dealing with two worlds in study of behavior and experience, one being objective and two being subjective. Objective is the physical world in which anyone can observe an appearance of and behavior, whereas subjective is the world of personal psychological experience. So we're going to take a look at that here next. Further down in the section, we see that what scientists observe and measure are observable objects in the real world. So it's nothing super extreme. It's just a basic outline. So in psychology specifically, many studies that are performed consist of observation and measurement of behavior. So it has to do with observation and behavior primarily, and it focuses in part on humans specifically, because we are trying to calculate how the human operates. We are still trying to find this answer. We also ask about inner experiences such as thoughts, feelings, and sensations. That's also what separates psychology from science. So 4 ways to study psychology or psychological processes. We see that number 1 being represents that with which we are all immediate acquainted, so like personal experience specifically, and then as well as our inner dialogue or inner beings and ourselves is the second way of measuring psychological processes, and then as well as our outward behaviors, how do I appear to others, and then fourth and last, which is the behaviors of others or other people or animals that anyone can directly observe, measure, or objectify. So essentially learn from others and experiences as well. So we can see and also use research participants' behaviors, which includes self-report. So a self-report is somebody self-reporting how they are going about their life in a specific given research, as a means of learning about his or her internal world. So in order to find that internal mechanism or how people operate, and then that we use behavior to study subjective experience indirectly. It is an important idea. All right, guys, so we have our next section, which is behavior, a road into subjective experience, as well as of research participants. So we're going to be looking into experience and how participants within research applies. So we want to ask questions that are difficult for participants in the scientific experiment to answer directly. So they want to be questions that you do have to think about, you do have to process, They do have to be questions that aren't just a yes and no. So marker variables is an event that occurs along with the process that we are studying. So an example, which is REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement, was observed when discovering dreaming. This was something that we discovered. So it's a marker variable. It's a variable within something that we are studying. So in neuropsychology research, we may want to know whether people can perceive certain forms of patterns after damage to a particular part of the brain that leaves them without personal awareness of what they have seen. So these are very good things to be able to see, are different marker variables, subject variables within something that we are observing. So we also see this idea of blind sight, which is people who are normally blind say that they see nothing and can correctly identify the locations of a particular pattern in an experimental situation. So we see that information can guide behavior without even entering subjective awareness. This meaning we learn from the behavior in which we live day to day. Also, we learn in this section that unconscious learning actually comes before conscious learning. So what happens in the mind, in the body, in the brain, in the connection internally actually happens and takes place first before it's presented into the physical world. So then we also see this idea of synthesia, which is perceiving with a different sense than would usually be the case. So like, for instance, instead of like when somebody were to cook and you were to smell something very, very good, instead of like smelling it, the sensation of seeing it actually is exposed even greater. We will be looking at different psychologists throughout history in this chapter. So with that, we also have to know that how you go about researching difficult processes may be different in each case, but it will still rely on inferences, okay? So it'll rely on inferences or drawing conclusion based on theoretical theories and experimental situations. So this is where we first get introduced in this book specifically to B.F. Skinner and his operant conditioning, which he designed this Skinner's box apparatus, in which is often a small chamber that is used to conduct operant conditioning in research within animals. You've probably heard this. We also spoke about this in Psychology for Dummies. So the scientific study of experience rests on the assumption that a person's behavior is a manifestation of what he or she is experiencing. So keep in mind that manifestation is a very vital characteristic to have or consider to bring your awareness to your manifestations. So behavior and experience are two sides of the same coin. So an example of this is research participants' feeling of anger is the internal and unseen experiential aspect. And the research participants' aggressive attacks are the external and observable behavioral aspect. So we must know that there's internal and external factors that take place in order for us to evaluate certain things, and we are still trying to get better at this. So our conclusion with that being that anxious people shift their attention toward emotionally threatened words. So specifically things that trigger them or things that cause them to actually click. That's what happens potentially with anxious people. This slide is an important slide, so just pay attention. So the use of objective behavior and appearances to study phenomena that cannot be observed directly, such as subjective experiences, it is not unique to psychology. It is a common feature of all sciences. So an example of this would be we can use gravity, yet we never visually actually see gravity itself. So those are subjective experiences or subjective things that actually take place that we aren't necessarily able to specifically measure. So a construct is a concept used in a particular theoretical manner that ties together a number of observations. So you create a construct of an ideal based on these various observations. So many major constructs of science, such as gravity, time, evaluation, electricity, genetic transmission, learning, or even life itself, are discussed and examined indirectly through their manifestations in the physical world. So when they take place, they are examined, they are looked at, and conclusively, in science, we use the observation of physical events to make inferences about not only the physical world, but also the unseen processes that underlie within it. All right, so this chapter is what is science? So we will be looking at the people who perform science. I mean, you also do this daily, but may not actually understand or think about it in that light. So we have to also consider that people are the only ones who are performing this idea of science. So this is a man-made construct that was designed after this idea of spirituality, Christianity, religion. It took place after that. So it is important also to remember that not only men and women of all races are scientists, but that women have also been an integral part of psychology since the beginning as a science within science within more than 100 years. So you can't take that away. I mean, there's men and women, it doesn't matter, of all races, of all kinds, of all countries. So a group of people share search and values. It is possible for scientists to work together as a large body of researchers after truth. So like, there's a lot of scientists that share the same beliefs and values. If we were to work together as a collective, we could see a huge shift in the way the medical system is, but obviously there's certain reasons why we won't. Science is merely a systematic way of using experience to test our ideas about the world. So it's a very systematic way. It's a process that takes place. And we also have to remember that what is unique about science is not the people who are scientists, but there are methods and the relationships between the people who practice science with these methods. So it's how they go about using various methods, different relationships between those methods to find out how we can discover how the human potential operates. All right, guys, so we have the summary, and then we are going to be completely done. So we see that the purpose of this chapter is to introduce you to science as an approach to learning about ourselves and the world around us. And we also see that accepting and the rejection of ideas throughout history, we did look at these factors, accepting and rejecting the various ideas throughout history, ideas such as tenacity, authority, common sense, and then also science. So science is actually useful for evaluating ideas because it is self-corrective. That is, it results from experiments after and offer feedback and feedback mechanisms to help clarify our ideas about what we are evaluating. So then we looked at science, and then now psychology, which psychology is interested in the study of outer appearances, behavior, as well as inner experiences, okay? So again, we do use behavior to make inferences concerning the inner worlds of various organisms. Thank you so much, guys, for coming out this week. I will be having a video coming out next week. So this is chapter 1, part 2, and I appreciate you guys. Reach out to me at therealpsychmedia@gmail.com if you do have any questions, if you do want any more clarification. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you guys next week.